Hey, welcome to our episode of Chad's Beer Podcast. Sorry, I can't come up with a more clever name than that. I'm your host, Chad of Chad's Beer Reviews, and today I'm talking to Kate Bernot. How you doing?
Hi, Chad. Thanks so much for having me. It's really nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard this a million times, but it's such a coincidence that you write about beer and you're just one letter off from having the word beer in your name.
Yes, if only that would be really cool.
Do you know
But
the ethnic
unfortunately,
origin of your name?
yeah. So people mispronounce it all the time as Bernot, wanting to make it very French. It is Bernot.
Oh,
It is shortened from 𝒂𝒏, which is Lithuanian. My paternal grandfather immigrated here from Lithuania, and at Ellis Island, they did what they do, which is try to
yeah.
Americanize your last name. And so we lost the very Lithuanian AS at the end of it.
Yeah, that's funny. Like my last name is Polenz, and it's like which is actually like a German name, but my great grandparents on my dad's side, they're from Poland, and it's one of those with like the weird squigglies and and it's like with C's and Z, like they just they just went by Poland to make it sound more German because actually at that time there was tons of German immigrants coming in.
Hmm.
So
That's that's really interesting. I'm Lithuanian on my father's side, German on my mother's side, and I feel like I'm much more sort of in touch with my German heritage, and it has
mhm.
obviously a lot of overlap with the beers that I enjoy. So
Yeah.
that's probably no coincidence.
Yeah, you know it's funny? My brother did one of those 23andMe tests a while ago, and like it didn't say Polish on there at all. It said like German. And I was just like,
Oh,
"What?
interesting.
Did our grandparents lie to us or?" By the way,
There's a lot of
Kate and I just did a review of Celebrator, Eyinger Celebrator Doppelbock, and I don't know if you're still working on yours. I finished mine, so I'm just got a LaCroix now because
nice.
it's making
I'm
me
still
really
finishing
thirsty.
mine. I'm savoring mine. It's so rare that I have an afternoon beer, so this is really nice for me.
Yeah, we're recording on a Wednesday afternoon, which is great for me because the landscapers always come on Tuesdays, and everybody else in the complex works. So it's like I have like almost the entire complex to myself, and it's nice and quiet around here. Yeah,
That's
the only
awesome.
interruption is going to be Leo and Logan, my cats. Yeah. So, let's jump into it. So, can you just give us a quick overview of who you like? Where'd you grow up? How age,
Yeah.
weight,
Life
height, blood
story.
type, mother's maiden name, last four of your
uh,
social?
no, most importantly, I'm a Pisces. That much is true. No, so I was born and spent the first 18 years of my life in central New Jersey, which does exist. If you are a central Jersey denier,
Mhm.
get the heck out of here. I grew up in Union, New Jersey, which is about 10 minutes from Newark Airport. It is not the most scenic place on earth, but it holds a strong place in my heart. So that's where I grew up. I later moved to Evanston, Illinois to go to school at Northwestern University, where I studied journalism. I got a job working at a newspaper in Chicago where my interest in beer sort of started budding. I was the nightlife reporter for the paper, which makes it sound like I did a lot more clubbing than I was doing.
Mhm.
um, but I was covering bars and restaurants, and at the time there was this thing called craft beer that was happening. This was like 2012. And all these small breweries were opening. I was really interested in it. Brewers and beer people seemed like my kind of people. They were nerdy. They were into Lord of the Rings. They liked metal music. I was like, yes,
Sounds like me.
this is my, yeah, right. I mean, beer draws lots of different people, but like there's a certain type sometimes. And brewers were so kind and open. I mean, everyone from home brewers to pro brewers was like, yeah, come watch us brew, come help us brew, whatever. So as a reporter, that was amazing because I got to learn by watching and participating. And then I moved to Phoenix, Arizona to take a job as an editor at Draft Magazine. RIP, does not exist anymore, but it was a really awesome beer magazine. And that was kind of my dream job. I mean, I got to focus entirely on beer. I got BJCP certified. I really, dove headfirst into beer as kind of my thing. So I worked there for a number of years, and now I am a freelance writer, and I write for a number of different publications, and I am the director of the North American Guild of Beer Writers. Chad, you're a member, so
Yeah,
you
I just
know.
joined
That's
recently.
wonderful. Thanks. We're so happy to have you. We have about 200 members, not just in North America, but all over the world. And we offer professional development opportunities, ways to learn and network with other writers, as well as podcasters, any kind of storytelling around beer. We have members who work for hop companies, but, you know, are on sort of like the content side. So it's really anyone who's telling stories about beer professionally is welcome to join. And I live in Missoula, Montana,
Mhm.
and I have a dog, and I have some
Mm.
backyard chickens. And I think that's about all people want to hear.
The chickens give you eggs?
They do. That's why I have them. I
Mhm.
love fresh eggs. And
Now,
yeah,
are they hens or roosters or well, I
no,
guess
all
only hens
hens.
lay
Yeah,
eggs.
I'm not zoned for roosters or for any other livestock. So
I live
um
in, like, a suburban neighborhood, but if you go just, like, a couple blocks from here, it's like it just turns on a dime into, like, slightly rural, and
mhm.
there's people that have or well, they used to have free range chickens, so you'd just be walking down the street and, like, there's houses, but, like, you'd see just chickens just walking up and down the road, and at one point, these people had roosters. I remember I was
They're
just
loud.
going for a walk, and all of a sudden, like, I got a sharp pain in the back of my calf, and like the rooster freaking attacked me,
Oh my
and
God.
I was like backing away from him and like doing like this like kicking thing.
Yeah. That's birds are tiny dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And my hens kill mice, the mice that are attracted to their chicken food.
Mhm.
It's pretty amazing to watch a chicken stalk and kill a mouse. If you ever
Mhm.
doubted how kind of terrifying birds can be, get some
Yeah.
backyard chickens.
Yeah. So I don't know if you know that. Well, I doubt you know this, but I actually when I was a kid, quote unquote kid, um, I went to junior college. It was called at the time. It's called SUNY Morrisville. I think they call it Morrisville Ag and Tech now. One of the
Mm,
state University of New York systems. It's a small school, kind of in the middle of nowhere in the country. And I went for journalism and I got my 2-year
mm.
associate's degree in journalism. And I actually worked at a small, fairly small town. It was a daily, but it was an afternoon daily. So like
Oh, cool.
it was a daily that people would get when they came home from work, and instead of first thing in the morning,
Yeah.
which was great for me because like, I didn't have to like stay up till 2 in the morning writing or get up at 6 a.m. Um, yeah, and that was like my first like real journalism job. And I mean, I wasn't especially good at it, but I mean, it was just covering, just a generic, local city council, town council,
Yeah.
county,
Yeah.
fires, police blotter, stuff like that.
Cat stuck in a tree. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever do work like that? Or it sounds like you went like straight to like a pretty high level there.
Oh, I skipped over all the unglamorous stuff. No, I my degree technically is in magazine journalism. I mean, we learned how
Mhm.
to do everything, but um, I think long form writing was really my passion, and I'm lucky that I get to still do some of that. But when I got that first job at the paper, it was for Red Eye, which is the Chicago Tribune's commuter paper. So it was like a paper that you got at all of the train stations and bus stations. And it was really focused at a millennial audience, so like 18 to 34 years old. So we got to do some pretty like unconventional and fun stuff, but it was a daily paper.
Mm.
I started there as a copy editor. I wasn't even really writing. I was just copy editing other people's work, which is an amazing way to learn. Truly, you get to read every single thing that goes into the paper, and you really develop an eye for accuracy and that kind of thing. But then I worked my way up to the nightlife reporting job by
Mhm.
doing a few restaurant and bar pieces just to prove to the editor that I could do it.
Mm.
But I think working at a daily paper is absolutely the best training you could have as a journalist. Like, you have to learn to work fast, you have to learn to work accurately, you have to be able to talk to anyone and
Right.
cover anything. And there's no hemming and hawing and trying to write some Shakespearean thing. It's like, the paper goes out tomorrow, you have 2 hours, where's your story?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a very good way to learn, for sure.
Yeah. So uh, I did you get into journalism because you liked, like, alcohol, beer, alcohol, nightlife kind of stuff, or did you get into journalism to be a journalist and you just happened to go into like this niche?
The second one. Yeah,
Okay.
so I was, I mean, I've loved reading journalism since I was a kid. Like, any newspaper or magazine that came into the house, even my dad's a huge fishing person.
Mhm.
I would read my dad's fishing magazines. Like, anything that came into the house, I was going to read. So I think that was probably fated from very early on. But then simultaneously in high school and college, I was always working in restaurants, front of house. So I was a server. I worked in a really amazing deli when I was in college. I just loved restaurants. And then I thought I wanted to go to culinary school after college. So I applied to culinary schools and got in and was thinking that's what I wanted to do. And then I realized that, like, there was a way to combine these two things, and it's writing about hospitality. And I don't know why
Mhm.
that didn't occur to me any sooner, but it was like, oh wait, you can do both of these things together. You don't have to be a chef and give up your journalism training. You could
Right.
just be a part of hospitality by covering it as a journalist. So that was sort of the way I came to it that way. And again, I don't know why it took me that long, but when you're 18, your brain is like a
Yeah, yeah.
mush, who knows? So
So did you take culinary classes, or you said you got
uh,
accepted?
I got accepted. I did not enroll, which I think was really smart because I don't think I have the like I'm not a night person. Like, I don't know why I thought like
Right.
working in restaurants was gonna like fit, especially like working in the kitchen. I don't know why I thought that was gonna work for me. I was like reading too much Anthony Bourdain, but um no, I didn't. I've never been formally trained in any kind of culinary stuff beyond like the beer sensory work.
Right, right, right.
I don't have any formal culinary training.
Yeah, I should have mentioned this at the beginning of the show because, like, I was actually kind of nervous to talk to you because, like, you're a professional and I'm a lowly amateur, even though I've been doing this show for what, 16 years,
That's
coming up
amazing.
on 17. But like, I don't really like make money doing this, make like peanuts doing this.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, so you're pretty, I don't know if uh, I would say it's probably more skill than luck, but it's pretty cool that like you get to write about, beer and just like the let's say recreational beverage, adult beverage, industry. Like,
Yeah.
do you write about like wine and hard seltzer and stuff like that, or
Yeah. First of all, I mean, I do consider myself very lucky to cover something that I'm really passionate about. I mean, the world needs God knows the world needs city hall reporters and education reporters and transportation reporters and all of that.
Mhm.
I happen have to have such a passion for what I write about. So yes, I feel very lucky to do this as a job. Um, yeah, so I do cover broader beverage alcohol, particularly one of the most frequent places you'll find my work is at sightlines.news. If you type that into your search bar, it is a subscription newsletter for beverage alcohol decision makers. So like high level, like C-suite
Mhm.
folks in the beverage alcohol industry, where myself and my editor Brian Roth combine like data analysis, market trends, reporting that we do to create kind of like insights and clarity on like where the industry is going from a business perspective. So that's broader beverage alcohol, not just beer. I do, wine coverage, spirits, seltzers. I do
Right.
even like non-alcoholic products, like broader consumer packaged goods and beverages like tea or coffee or energy drinks. So that's been really fascinating because, I mean, I know we're two beer people, but I mean, Chad, do you drink? I'm sure you drink like other. I see you have like liquor bottles behind you. It's not like beer's the only thing
Uh,
you drink, right?
yeah, but beer's the only thing like I'm certified in and like
Mhm,
that I feel comfortable talking about.
mhm.
Um, like
Yeah,
I'm BJC. You can't really see it, but I have BJCP and Cicerone table server, whatever it's called,
yeah.
certified. I want to get like the full Cicerone certificate. Did my website cam just black out?
You're just frozen for me.
Okay, it'll come back in a
I hear
second.
you fine though. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
Another web browser window and it like froze up the camera. So
Oh.
lesson learned. Won't do that. Um, yeah. So like I was saying, like I was kind of like nervous to interview you because like you're a real professional, you know, and like it kind of reminds me of back like in the early days of this show, and I would actually like go to beer fest and like meet professional brewers one on one, and I'm the amateur out there. I'm like it's kind of like I guess like the closest analogy would be like sports, like the difference between like a fan or like the actual play-by-play broadcaster and like the color man or like the retired professional who like know like there's like you can have all the data in the world and all your opinions that you want, but like it's still there's certain je ne sais quoi quality to it that's missing from having actually been on the field. So I mean, like I've homebrewed. I've actually brewed on a micro or nano brewery system with my homebrew club, but I've never like nobody's ever paid me to make beer. I've
Nor
got
me. No one would pay any money for the beer that I would brew.
I've gotten paid like a little bit of money to write about it. Like I wrote I don't know if you knew this or not, but I co-wrote this book with Josh Christie about 10 years ago, The Handbook of Porters and Stouts. And actually, I didn't even really write anything original for this book because I already had my beer blog at the time. And the publisher approached me and just said, "We want to use like a couple hundred of your reviews for this book."
Mm.
I was
Hmm.
like, "Sure." um,
Well, don't sell yourself short because I have never written a book. I've never co-authored a book, so
yeah.
you've got that on me.
Well,
I
you could
mean,
probably collect some of your articles into a book unless although you kinda have to have, like, a theme, obviously, like, for a book, and, like, you're kinda writing about, like, the news of the time. And, I mean, I guess you could write like, you could pick, like, one thing that's, like, happened over a long time. I mean, in the beer world, I'd probably say it'd be kinda like the war between macro and craft, which seems to be simmering down in the last few years. Because I remember like, you mentioned, like, 2012. And, I had already been doing this show for like 4 years at the time, and I forget which year I started, but, in Albany, I used to live in Albany, New York for, um I mean, I grew up in Schenectady, which is the next town over. And after I got out of the Navy in 2007 and I moved back home or, well, Albany, and, I started the show and I started doing a beer blog just for fun, and then I was contacted by the Albany Times-Union, which is a big paper in Albany. And they used to have, I don't think they have it anymore, but they had like tons and tons of blogs on the newspaper site for
mhm.
like, everything from like the mundane, like food and beer, video games. Then they would have like, politics and, like all kinds of controversial topics and stuff like that. But I was just like
Mm.
the beer blogger. And I'd go around to like, local breweries, pubs, things like that. And also just kind of like pontificate on random stuff. And, I think like that kind of caught the attention of the publisher's eye to get this book deal.
Yeah.
By the way, if anybody's wondering, like, I don't make any money off this book anymore. I got paid about at the time the equivalent of like 1 month's rent. Yeah, unless you're Stephen King, you don't really make a lot of money selling, books or publishing books or whatever.
Unless they go
Um,
into multiple editions, that's when you
yeah,
start to maybe make some money, is like if they reprint the Oxford Companion to Beer twice, then it's
yeah,
like, all
yeah.
right. But
So,
no,
kind of
for
getting
the
back
yeah.
that question I was gonna ask like 10 minutes ago, like what would you say is kind of like the biggest like news story as far as like in the beer
Mm,
industry of like the last like decade or so? Because like there's been
mhm,
to me, it's kind of like I was saying, like, it used to be like a war between macro and craft, but the macros keep buying up craft or like the craft, like a lot of the big craft breweries, like will at least partially sell to bigger conglomerates. Like Stone sold to Sapporo, Founders sold to San
Mahu
Miguel
San
or whatever.
Miguel.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know if they sold completely, but like there's always like,
Minority
interesting.
ownership
Yeah,
or
exactly.
distribution deals. Yeah.
Yeah, and like Southern Tier and Victory merge, and Sam Adams and Dogfish Head merge. So
Hmm.
it seems to be we have like just macro adjunct like Bud Miller Coors, and then we have Stone Sapporo, and actually Asahi owns a lot of breweries, and
Hmm.
then like even I think like Carlsberg and Diageo, I think it's called, or Diageo. I think they own Guinness, and
Diageo.
then
Yeah. Diageo
yeah,
owns Guinness. Yeah.
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 And then it's just kind of now, and it's kind of like you just have like your tiny little local breweries, and it seems like now everybody's stuck in this. I don't think niche is the right word, but just vertical, or I don't know what word
Hmm.
I'm looking for here. But it's like if you're small, it's like almost impossible. Like if you're to have like the same kind of story as like from 20 years ago. Like I don't know if there's gonna be another Dogfish Head. Somebody just starts a brew pub, and then they somehow become the next Sam Adams. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I think you're completely accurate with that. I mean, you and I were covering beer at covering craft beer at a period of like truly unprecedented,
Mm,
unimaginable growth for the industry, double digit volume gains every single year
yeah,
in the mid 2010s. And now that has totally leveled off, and in fact, you know, I think we may see years of negative volume growth for craft at the same time that there are more breweries than ever, right? So the size of the pie is not growing. In fact, it might be shrinking, and yet there are more breweries than ever. There's just not really that need or that opportunity anymore for a company like Lagunitas or Dogfish Head to really come along and start from something small to become this national player because of so many market forces. I mean, we already have those breweries now. The capital required to do that is massive in an industry that's not growing on the whole. So, I think we're living through a very different craft beer market now than we were 8 years ago.
yeah,
Um, and it's a little bit weird for those of us
yeah.
who
I
grew
don't
up
know.
in the heyday.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw my last podcast with Darwin. He does Darwin's beer reviews. He's actually an advanced Cicerone certified, and
Yeah.
he lives local here. We've been friends for a few years, and he was saying basically the same thing. It's just kind of like everybody's just kind of like stuck where they are,
Mhm.
and it's also, and this kind of leads me into my next question is like because usually when I do this show, I'm talking like other beer tubers, people who just do what I do, review beer for fun.
Mhm.
Um, and you're more about like writing about the industry, not so much like your own reviews and things like that.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so I mean, it's like as far as I can tell, and a lot of this has to do with Tavor, which I don't know if you use that app or
Mm.
not. It's
I
a
don't, but I'm very familiar with it.
yeah. So
Yeah.
uh, sorry, the screen's blown out. Tavor is where I get all my, not all, but most of my beer from, because
Mhm.
even though I live in Central Florida, not too far from Orlando, you'd be surprised. It's like a beer desert around here.
Hmm.
Like there's a liquor store within walking distance of my apartment, but I call it the beer museum because all the bottles are covered in dust, and it's always like, here's what people were drinking 5 years ago.
Oh, no.
That's not even the worst. So it's the same chain. They have another store, and I posted this on Instagram last summer. It's still there as far as I know. Go on my Instagram, scroll way, 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 way down. You'll see beer bottles in the store, like literally with cobwebs and spider webs on them. And I'm like, why are they just sitting on the shelf? This is taking
Yeah.
up real estate. I don't know. I don't get these beer stores and like why they're just wasting real estate. I mean, it's probably a Pareto principle where like 20% of their inventory accounts for
Mm.
80% of their sales.
Mm.
But so it's like, what do you even need the other 80% of the real estate for? Why not just have a booth like the
Yeah.
size of this room? you
Yeah,
know?
why not just stock things that move? I mean, this is what I think we are seeing that principle bear out in the on-premise, like in bars and restaurants. Remember when like having 100 taps was like the thing to do if you owned a craft
Yeah.
beer bar? And now it's like, oh right, it's really hard to maintain freshness with that many taps. Like you're just realistically not moving through a sixtel of Dunkelweizen all that often. And like, it's
Right,
not great
right,
for these
right.
things to just be sitting there. So I think now the move is towards much more focused and like smaller draft selections, but of stuff that's actually gonna sell. And it's like better freshness for people. You can move through things faster, put on new stuff faster. So yeah, I think we're seeing that in like the on premise, and you know, bottle shops and stuff should also be kind of applying the same principle.
Yeah. Where do you I mean, I know you're out in Montana. I don't know how big your city is, but it's like, how do you get beer out there?
Yeah. So Missoula is a town of 70,000 people. The University of Montana is here. So
Okay.
we're one of the 5 largest cities in Montana, although it's a state of 1 million people. So that's not really saying anything. Um, we have one area code for the entire state, which blows my mind as a person who grew up in New Jersey, which like there are like 17 area codes in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I mean, I buy
I still have
luckily,
my 518 area code.
yeah, I mean, your the area code where you got your cell phone, like I will never give mine up either.
I know. There's no reason to. They're completely
No.
irrelevant.
No. However, I would love a Montana 406 area code because it is really fun that it's for the whole state. Anyway,
Mhm.
uh, so I'm lucky. My grocery store where I do the bulk of my grocery shopping actually is like uh, has a really really excellent beer selection for Montana. Granted, we do not get distribution of very much. I mean, we get Founders. We just got Bell's actually, which is exciting for me. Love their beer. Um, we get a lot of the California breweries, tons of like Washington State and Oregon breweries. Um, but you know, anything east of the Mississippi is we're not going to find it. So, you know, I
Really?
go to my not
Can you
really.
get
I mean,
can you get Sam Adams?
yes, yeah, Boston Beer Products for sure, but they're national. I mean,
What
like
about
what's a good
Dogfish Head?
example? Now that Dogfish Head is one with Sam Anna with Boston Beer, yes, we get Dogfish Head, but that was
Mhm.
not until you know a couple years ago since I've lived in Montana. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, it's pretty limited. I go to my specialty bottle shop, which carries a lot of like cool imports and stuff like that. But honestly, I rely on traveling a lot. I mean, I travel a good amount for work and for pleasure. So, you know, beer is always a part of that. And then because particularly in my role as an editor at Craft Beer and Brewing magazine, breweries do send me a good amount of like editorial samples. And that's really helpful because, you
Mhm.
know, I just got a box from Transcendent, which is this very small brewery in Connecticut that I would have like absolutely no way of acquiring. So like that's really helpful just for me to see what other regions are doing. And I do have a select group of trusted friends who mail me many snow globes uh,
That's
through postal carriers, which I
that's
will not talk about.
hilarious. I don't know if you go on this channel and you go to, like you sort my videos by most popular, one of the most
Mhm.
popular of all time is how to mail beer. It's a video I did, like, in 2010,
Oh wow,
and,
yeah,
I'm talking about actually mailing it through the mail, and
physically, yeah, yep,
yeah, and I would like because you're supposed to put what's in it or whatever, and, like,
yep.
I don't know if they've changed the rules since then, but I know, like, way back then, like, you weren't allowed to mail beer, so
No,
I
you're
would
still
put
not. You are still
yeah.
not. That is a that is illegal.
When they asked what was in it, I put Christmas snow globes because it's that way it's
Heck
liquid
yeah.
and it's fragile, yeah,
I
and
was once
explains why it's heavy.
right. Well, so I was once mailing some beer. Oh my god, don't come arrest me. To, you know, I send Montana beer care packages to folks. Chad, if you would like some, I will send you a selection of Montana beer. And I took it to the shipping place, and I don't know, I wasn't expecting them to ask me what was in it. Like I hadn't been asked that last time, and they were like, "Oh, what's in this package?" And obviously it's heavy, obviously it's kind of liquidy, and I just completely blanked, and I'm a terrible liar, and I just went, soup." And the guy just looked at me, and I was like, "God, Kate, that is the worst answer you could like. Who mails soup? What are you talking about?" And I mean, to his credit, the dude just looked at me and was like, "Okay," and typed in like soup, and I was just like, "Duh." damn it, Kate, worst answer ever. Snow globes is a way better answer
Was that the
than
post
speed.
office or UPS
It
or
was,
FedEx?
I think it was, I want to say it was UPS, because the postal service does not ask you. They only say check here that it's not liquid,
Yeah.
fragile, perishable, lithium batteries, whatever.
I think you can send stuff. You can send beer through UPS and FedEx. I think you might need a special license or something, or you might have to pay extra for it or something. Like it's not illegal. Like
No, there is a shipping license that you can obtain, and I think for like a personal use, like non-commercial, it's only like $100 or something like that. I think,
for
and
each
I should be,
shipment, or is that like for a
no,
year?
for a
Oh,
year or something like
lifetime.
that. It's really not that expensive. Um, and the reason that, the government is concerned about this is for excise tax purposes. Like they want to make
Yeah.
sure you're not basically like an illegal beer distribution
Yeah,
business.
you're not bootlegging.
Yes, yeah. Anything weird about alcohol laws, you
Yeah,
can
they all
always
go
trace
back
back to
100 years.
prohibition.
Yeah.
The prohibition is always the answer to like, why can't I do XYZ with
Yeah,
alcohol?
what's like the beer laws and the beer scene like in Montana? Is it
Oh
I mean,
man,
I would
our
assume
beer laws
Montana.
are weird.
Yeah, because technically, doesn't Montana border Utah
We do
or
not border
Colorado?
Utah. There's Wyoming and
Mhm.
then Colorado, and then Utah.
Yeah.
But we're in that Rocky Mountain West. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. The
Um,
the Rocky Mountains, the Pacific Northwest, you have like this really left and really right
mhm,
political states like right next to each other, button heads.
mhm.
Because I was gonna
Yeah.
say, I didn't know if Montana was kind of like Alabama and Mississippi and those southern states that like just recently legalized homebrewing, or do they have like a
No.
limit, like on beer can only be 6% ABV or something like that? I think that's how it is in Utah.
Yeah, that is how it is in Utah. Nothing quite that draconian. Montana is a very interesting political state. It has historically quite like a libertarian streak, right? Like we're out west, like
Mhm.
don't tell me how to live and I won't tell you how to live, right? And like,
Yeah, don't they have
you
like if you get a speeding ticket, you just pay the cop right there and you don't have to go to court?
nah, Montana's like fun fact was that there was no speed limit on our highways for like until like within my lifetime. Now it is 80 on our highways
Wow.
out here, which means people are driving like 95.
That's how it is in
Um,
Florida too.
it's
I go
wild.
80 and I get past and people like honking at me, even though the speed limit's only 70.
Mm. Uh, but when it comes to our beer law, so Montana has kind of a libertarian streak to it, but now it's becoming more right leaning. However, we have a very powerful tavern association. So basically, if you are a liquor license holder, those are extremely expensive because they're capped by a quota system. So your liquor license is worth like $1 million or more. So people who own liquor licenses are very, very protective of them. And so the Tavern Association has historically put a lot of caps on what breweries can do out of their own tap room. To this day, if you have a straight up brewery taproom license in Montana, you can only sell consumers 48 ounces of beer per day, and they will track it. So
That's like
that
what
is,
that's
it's
four
like
12 ounces, right? Yeah.
4 12-ounce pours, like, so, or like 3 pints, no, less than 3 pints, 16
Yeah.
ounce. Yeah. So, or just about that. So, I mean, honestly, that is generally kind of enough for me at a brewery. Like I don't know, I'm a small person. But if you're sitting there for a whole day trying to watch a football game or something, it's kind of annoying. They give you this card and they're tracking how many you've had, or they're giving you tickets to redeem or whatever. And it's just kind of weird for people who visit our state. Um, Additionally, if you have that brewery taproom license, you have to stop serving at 8 p.m.
Wow.
any day of the week. Saturday night, 8 p.m. you have to close, which is wild. So,
Wow. So last call is 8 p.m.?
well, if you have a brewery license, if you have a
Oh,
beer and wine license, or you have like a restaurant license, something like that, you can be open later. But there are several just straight up tap rooms in Montana that, people come in from out of town, they get there at 7:30 and suddenly it's last call and they're like, what's going on? It's a Saturday night.
Yeah.
Um,
It's funny, like, how alcohol laws are, like, how people have figured a way to get around them. 'Cause I remember, like, in
mhm,
Pennsylvania, like, I don't know if they still like, you weren't allowed to sell beer in supermarkets there.
right.
They might
Mhm.
have changed that, recently, and, like, you
Hmm.
couldn't even sell like, there was no such thing as, like, liquor stores. Like, you could only get
Mm,
beer from bars. So and
mhm.
I've actually seen this once in Florida,
Hmm.
where it's a bar on one side of the building and an actual store on the other side of the building, and there's, like, a door that goes between them. That's how they get around it. It's like you can actually have a package store. I
Yeah.
think it's probably a holdover from
In Chicago, we
prohibition.
called those slashies, bar slash liquor store.
Slashy.
Yeah. Yeah. Montana is a control state, which means the state also controls the sale of hard liquor. So
Mhm.
any if you want to buy a bottle of tequila, you want to buy a bottle of whiskey, you have to go to a Montana state-run liquor store to do it.
Mhm.
Several other states have the same setup, but that is also different from other places I've lived.
Yeah, it's funny, in Florida, there's a chain of liquor stores called ABC, but
Hmm.
when I lived in Virginia, there's also a chain of liquor stores called ABC, but that's they're government run, like Alcohol
Yeah.
Beverage Commission or Control
Yes.
or something like that.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
but ABC, they just call it "Always Be Celebrating." I'm like, "Always be celebrating?" That's what an alcoholic says. Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, the state by state thing is really interesting now having lived in New Jersey, Illinois, Arizona, and Montana. It's been completely different in every single
Yeah.
place. In New Jersey, you can't buy beer at the grocery store. You have to go to a liquor
Yeah.
store even
Well,
to
I
buy
think
beer.
I don't know if they've changed that, but I know there was, like,
Mm.
a slew of more beer-friendly legislation that just passed there.
I think that might have had more to do with actual tap rooms than, like, where they can
Yeah.
sell beer at retail, but I always try to keep one eye on it. It's my home state. I go back sometimes, so I'm always trying to
By the
keep up with
way,
what they're doing.
does Montana have state income tax?
We that is a really good question. We do, but no sales tax. Sorry, I had to think about that.
Okay. It's the
I
opposite in
just did my
Florida.
taxes. I should know this.
Yeah. There's no state income tax here, but we do have sales tax.
Mm.
It's actually one of the reasons I moved here.
Hmm. Yeah,
Anyway, so
there
I
you
kinda
go.
wanna get back to, like, journalism.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I have, like, so many questions, I don't know where to start. Um, like, for you as a writer, like, how do you, like, make up your own assignments? Because I know, like, you're a
Mm,
freelancer, like, are
mhm.
you a W-2 employee for anybody or just a 1099 for
I'm a
Wow.
1099 for everybody. I have 2 clients that I have, like, steady contracts with, and that
Mhm,
is, Sightlines.news, which I mentioned, and, which is like an outgrowth of Good Beer Hunting, so some people might know me from Good Beer Hunting, it's the same parent company. And then also with Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. So I have, like, a year-long contract with them to produce X amount of work and
mhm,
get my 1099. Pretty much everything else I'm pitching. Sometimes I get assignments. Sometimes an editor comes to me and says, we're thinking about XYZ and we know this is something you
mhm,
would
cover, yeah.
cover. Yeah. Would you be interested in taking on this assignment? Um, but quite often it is, yeah, pitching my own stories to editors.
That was, yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. 'Cause I was about to
Mm.
say, did you ever, like, pitch ideas and they're like, "No, that's a stupid idea," and then you bring it to somebody else and then they're like, "Yeah, that's a great idea." And then
Yeah, I mean, editors are generally a little more polite than telling me it's a stupid idea. I mean, I can read between the lines, but no,
yeah.
people are polite. Um, yeah, I mean, I think so much of pitching is not just the idea you have, but understanding what that particular publication covers and like how they tend to cover stories. So oftentimes I'll come across a really interesting idea, story I want to tell. And then I kind of work backwards. It's like, okay, that's an interesting story. Which publication would actually run this and kind of in
Mhm,
what form and what angle would they want? So, for example, I've done a few pieces of beer writing now or actually just broader alcohol writing now for the Washington Post's food section. And they're a newspaper, it's for the food section. They're read nationally, but they're still DC based. So they want something that is an angle that's broad enough that it appeals to like people living anywhere in the US, but they
right,
kind of want some tie to DC.
Right.
So, it's just about knowing what kind of stories fit where, I think is like one of
Mhm.
the core parts of being a freelancer.
Yeah, and where do you get your news from? Because I bet you have this. So I just use Google Alerts, and I have like so many topics. I was gonna bring this
Yeah.
up on the website, but it's like I just do like Molson Coors, like I do like all like the major breweries, or
Yeah.
just do like a search for InBev, and I also have like certain writers that I follow, like all right,
Yeah.
brewery strike because we Constellation Brands. Should probably
Wow.
look.
Yeah.
This says Michael Jackson, but that means like Michael Jackson, the beer hunter,
Michael
not
James Jackson.
yeah.
Yes.
Dry
Um,
January Brewers Association, and then like I just started a alert for your name, so whenever you write something, it should come into my.
wow.
Although if you're writing WAPO and I think Good Beer Hunting, they're both behind paywalls. Although WAPO is fairly cheap, it's only like for like basically like $1 a week or something like that. That's not too bad.
Yeah, many of the newspapers are quite affordable. The sightlines.news stuff is slightly more expensive for a subscription, but that's because we're really writing this for like industry folks.
Right.
And um, if you're the CMO of Ray's beer division, like you can spring for that subscription. um, but okay, so where do I get my beer news?
Yeah,
I mean,
industry.
yeah, because I write a lot about the business side, I do subscribe to quite a few like trade focused publications. So have to give shout outs to my wonderful colleagues. Also the beer writing world is like very small and we all know each other and like really are collegial and like I
Mhm,
love other beer writers as people. So in addition to them just like doing great work. So got to give a shout out to my colleagues at Beer Marketers Insights, at Brewbound, Dave Infante's newsletter Fingers, as well as the work he does for VinePair is excellent. Beer Business Daily, like a lot of these trade publications are what
mhm,
I'm reading to kind of get that like really nitty gritty business
mhm.
stuff.
I was
Um,
wondering, do you know this guy? Or have you read this book, The Beer Geek Handbook by Patrick
Patrick
Dawson?
Doss, I am aware. I know who Patrick is. I don't believe we've ever met. I do not know him personally.
I was gonna say that book is awesome. That's like I was reading that
Nice.
book and I was like, oh my god, if I wrote a book, this is the book. I'm gonna try to get him on the show.
Yeah, I
Um,
was gonna say, where's
yeah,
your
I
episode with
highly
Patrick?
recommend that book. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. I asked you this like a half hour ago, but you were thinking about writing a book?
I do. I don't know. I've always felt like it would come to me organically. There'll just be some topic that I kind of am covering
Mhm,
as like a news beat that I just can't let go of. Um, and it needs to turn into a book. But there's so many excellent beer books already that I really struggled to know what that niche would be because I mean, I have shelves full of beer reference books that are like fantastic and I'm just like, damn, I'll never write a better book than that. So
yeah.
um yeah, so I think it'll come out of my reporting.
Mhm,
And there'll be some story that I can't let go of
mhm.
and I'll know it when I see it, but I'm not going to force it. And also no one. Very few people make money off writing books, as you mentioned.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm sort of like, if it's gonna be a passion project, it better be something that I can't imagine not writing.
yeah. There's another
So
author. Do you know Morella Amato? She's a French
yes,
Canadian.
yes.
I
I
don't think I've ever met her, but I think I used to tweet back and forth with her. I'm not on Twitter anymore. Um, yeah, and then, like
She's wonderful. She's so
she
smart.
like this book is kind of like even though it's not marketed as such, I mean it's kind of like it's a lot like Brandy Mosier's like tasting beer where it's just kind of going over styles. But that's basically the whole thing. It's just a real short introduction to like major styles and
Yeah.
um
You
I
see
think
my
she kind of writes
tasting beer
yeah.
has a million post-it notes in it and references.
I have both editions, the first and the second. I gotta get him on the show too. What I was
Randy's
gonna say
great.
is, I mean, um, like being a woman in the beer or just
Mhm.
adult beverage industry. Um, I mean, well, first of all, especially when it comes to beer, and especially when it comes to like hard liquor, is like that's certainly like a man's field, you know. Like
Mhm.
I don't know what it is. Like I mean, you could probably what's it like get Brett Weinstein on the show and like maybe talk about like maybe it's a genetic thing of just what men and women like as far as flavors and things like that, or um but like up until recently, like 'cause I'm not married, but I have a steady relationship now. My girlfriend Christina, she's been on my show many times. She wasn't like huge into beer when I met her, but I kind of like turned her like into a beer nerd now. She loves the sours and hazy IPAs. So like you're a woman in the well, not in the beer industry, but writing about the beer industry. You must have by now written about what's like being like female beer drinkers versus men beer drinkers, or like women who actually work in the industry, like Pink Boots Society and things like that. Um, or is that not something you bother with?
No, I've certainly it's something I've r- written about here and there
Mhm.
throughout my career. I think it's so I would never dream of speaking for all women who cover beer or women who like beer. I mean, everyone has like very different experiences and opinions on this. Um, I find like a real push pull between wanting to like assert myself as like I am a woman who's in this field and who cares about it and likes to see other women in positions of power and decision making in media and in beer. And then I also sometimes feel like I don't want to talk about it at all because I don't want that to be the I want people to ask me about my general expertise and not like but as a woman. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's a very and I think a lot of women struggle with that kind of women in male dominated fields struggle with that where you so much want to talk about your gender and then you simultaneously never want to talk about your gender.
right, right,
So
right.
but the way I've found to kind of resolve that for myself um is I've written quite extensively particularly for sightlines about women's importance as beer consumers. And I think that is something that I will go to bat for every single day. Research, public health research, government public health research from like the National Institutes of Health and things like that show that for the generation that is turning 21 now, the
Mhm.
average drinker now under the age of 25 is more likely to be a woman than a man. Women under 25 are
Wow.
drinking at higher rates than men are, which is the first time this has ever happened in US history.
Do you think that's
So,
because of vaping or?
I think there's a lot of demographic factors at play there. I think it is changing social norms, changing availability of different kinds of products, like whether that's cannabis or yeah, vaping, things like that. Um, Also, like women are more economically empowered than they've ever been at any time in US history. So women have disposable income, which we know correlates to higher degrees of
Right.
alcohol consumption. But all of this is to say that like the average young drinker now is more likely to be a woman than a man. And so if people in beer are not placing women at the center of the decisions they're making about their company, like you're missing the mark
Mm.
because and this isn't to say like make pink beer, make glitter beer, or whatever. Like it's not
Yeah.
that simple and like women aren't stupid.
You don't have to cater
um
to like, remember,
yeah.
like, in the I think it was in the Beer Wars documentary, there actually was a beer at the time called Chick Beer,
Yeah.
and it was just like a
Yep.
Bud Light clone or something like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
it
Yeah.
seems like
Don't do that.
yeah. I
But
mean,
have
it's funny, like, as kinda like a gag, but it's like you can't really, it's short-lived, you know?
exactly.
Like those super hot pepper beers, it's like, am I supposed to actually enjoy this, or is this just like, "Okay, that was a gag. I don't
Right.
know how you make a living
Right.
off that."
Right. But it's, it really is a question of like who is at the front of your mind when we're talking about beer drinkers. And if women aren't prominently focused in that conversation, again, I'm not saying anyone should like prioritize women over men or whatever, but if like women aren't factoring into that conversation as you're planning events, as you're coming up with new beers, as you're deciding what to do in your tap room, like you're just going to be missing out and you're going to be behind the 8 ball. So that's the way that I've found, like, continuing to investigate and research like women as beer consumers and to write about that has been sort of the way that I've
Yeah.
reconciled all of this.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
bet you there's a story in there somewhere if you haven't already written it. Like if you go into like a more cerebral kind of
Mhm.
approach, like I said, talk to
Mhm.
Brett Weinstein or some
Mhm.
evolutionary
Mhm.
biologists about like something like you can interview like brewery owners or like just somebody that's like maybe certain color schemes,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
sorry to be generic, but like maybe if you had
Mhm.
pink, it like
Yeah.
attracts women more or something
Yeah.
like that,
Yeah.
or like we don't. Oh, this is a hot button topic. I don't know if I should ask this on mic,
Go ahead.
but like I was gonna say, all right. So I grew up in the '80s and '90s, and you remember like the old beer commercials. Let's just say like the 20th century. And, like Budweiser always had like the three girls on the blanket. Their bathing suits made the
Yep.
Budweiser logo, and like it was
Mhm.
very like associated with like girl in bikini holding beer, therefore you should buy beer.
Yep.
Those days seem to be really long gone,
Yep.
but it seems to have swung 180 degrees in the other direction
Mm.
of, especially on Instagram, of I don't know what to call them without sounding like a sexist jerk. But there's so many women on there who just are naked and they're just doing this and they're holding a beer or they're in the
Yep.
shower. You know,
Mhm.
they're
Mhm.
clearly taking advantage of their body,
Yep.
and they're always like holding like the must-have beer of the moment or
Yes.
some beer you never heard
Yeah.
of.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
wondering, like, there's like here's a topic of, well, I don't know if it's a whole book, but it's certainly at least
Mm.
like a podcast out of it.
Mm.
Um, this reversed sexism of women exploiting themselves for, you know,
Mm.
attention, money, OnlyFans. Not even, you don't have to be on OnlyFans. Just go on
Yeah.
Instagram and you're gonna
Yeah.
get tons of followers. Just be in a bikini holding a beer. Doesn't have to be Bud Light. It could be Bourbon County, or
Mhm.
something that's in here.
Well,
Um,
prepare yourself because I was a gender studies minor in college, so I feel prepared to answer this question. Yeah, I mean, look, that's not the route that I take with, like, how I present myself and my
yeah,
interest in beer. However, I would argue, that self-exploitation is not a thing. Like, exploitation is someone else making a
right.
decision for you. And the fact that these women are em empowered and choosing to present themselves this way, no one's forcing them to do this. There's not, um, uh, they could easily stop doing it, or no one is economically benefiting except them. So in that sense, I think, you know, women can choose how to present themselves, men can choose how to present themselves. It doesn't mean it's something I like want to necessarily follow or whatever, but if they're having fun with it and maybe making some money and people like it, then
Hmm.
I don't know, I say go with God, like more power to you. If I Also, maybe if I looked that amazing in a bikini or in the shower, I would have different views.
Yeah.
But, like that's what they're choosing to do. They seem to be having a ton of fun with it. Like I've met some of these women. They're like very smart people. It takes a lot of work to do. I think it takes a lot of work to look that good. It takes a lot of work to like produce that kind of content, to stay on top of it all the time. Um, I don't have a problem with it. I just like live and let live. Like if that,
Mm.
yeah, doesn't bother me none. And they seem to be having a great time. And if it like, beer is fun. And if that's their
Yeah.
version of fun, then fine by
Yeah.
me.
I mean,
So
I'd be lying if I say I wasn't a bit of a hater. I mean, I kind of am because I've been doing this show for 16 years. I only have 4,000 YouTube and also because like I don't get by on my looks. Obviously, I get by on my opinions on beer. And like I'm trying to
yeah.
make the show as entertaining as fun, and I'm always evolving it and everything. Like even this thing is
Yeah.
brand new. Like why didn't I do this 16 years ago? Um,
Well,
And like
there's different
SEO,
audiences, right? Like there's
yeah.
different,
Well, and
you're
it's
doing something
also,
different than they're doing.
yeah, SEO is constantly evolving. So what was,
Yeah,
SEO in 2008 is archaic by today's standards, I'm sure.
true.
Um, Before we wrap, I wanted to ask you about something like fairly serious, and actually, you and I probably have this in common.
Hmm.
Did you hear about the new Department of Labor independent contractor rule?
Uh, no, tell me more.
Well, did you hear about AB5 in California a couple years ago?
I did. Yeah, I tracked that a
Yeah.
little bit.
It was
Yeah.
basically meant to turn Uber and Lyft drivers into employees, but they
Mhm.
really screwed the pooch on the way they wrote the legislation, and they
Mhm.
put tons and tons of people out of work just because there's when you think independent contractor, I mean, you probably think most people probably think exactly what you do, a freelance writer,
Mhm.
but it's
Mhm.
also it can apply to Uber, Lyft drivers, DoorDash,
Mhm.
Instacart, gig workers. That's what I do
Mhm.
for my day job.
Mhm.
But it also applies to like anesthesiologists. A lot of people don't know
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
Um, People who
Hmm.
work in theater, actors, obviously, singer-songwriters,
Mhm.
um, anybody who works like freelance, or even just like a small business owner where like they're a business of one, they're their own employee. So anyway, so the Department of Labor ruled like they just kind of made this up out of nowhere. And it's really hard to talk about like getting political. I mean, I'm independent. I'm not Democrat or Republican. I despise both parties pretty much equally. Um, but it's clearly, in my opinion, it's clearly a ploy to try to force people to become employees because then they become employees and they can join unions, and if they join unions, they can vote for Democrats. Um, but yeah, so like in because I'm also a gig worker by my trade, I guess you would use that term. Um, and I'm not sure how it's going to affect you, but like they basically they took AB5, even though it was a disaster in California, in my opinion, and they're trying to make that a national rule. And like AB5 hosed so many people, like it didn't create a single job; it actually cost tons and tons of people
Hmm.
their jobs. So next time you talk to like one of your editors, you might want to ask them about this because they might have to actually put you on payroll, depending on how this rule is interpreted and goes. Like people are suing left and right, and there's committees on it and everything.
Is it
So
based on like you working a certain number of hours for a particular
well, it's based on like you
client?
might have heard like an ABC test of like, is it outside the control of what the
Hmm.
corporation usually does?
Hmm.
And it's like but like that's what they want is like, but like if you're a writer and you're writing articles for a magazine like that, you fail the test right there on the first
Hmm.
prong. Like that's like what a magazine does is publish articles. It's like
Mhm. Mhm.
by this new Department of Labor rule, it's like they want you to become an employee for like all the
Hmm.
magazines and websites that you work for.
Hmm. Hmm. I would have to learn more to have like an educated opinion on this, and I also rely on my wonderful tax preparer to tell me this stuff. I had to once I started freelancing, I was like, I am not doing my own taxes anymore. Good God, someone do this for me, or else I will weep and fall apart. So I would have a lot of more questions about how this applies to me. However, I mean, I think there are people who are freelance writers who like are writing primarily for one publication and are producing like this really high volume of content and who would like to be on staff if a staff job were there that like yeah, maybe some of these companies are taking advantage of the fact that they don't pay them healthcare and whatever. However, for me, I really want the flexibility of being a freelancer.
Yeah,
Like I don't
me
want
too.
the staff position right now, at least. And I enjoy the fact that my income streams are diversified and I have control over what assignments I take and what assignments I don't take. My husband and I went to Patagonia for an entire month in February of last year. And it's like, yeah, I need that freedom to just turn down work for a month and be like, I'm
Yeah.
not going to work this month. See ya in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So, I think it's a nuanced topic where some people probably are being kind of exploited as contractors. And then in other situations, people are like actively choosing to be
Mhm.
freelancers and don't want the staff job. So yeah, it's a hard, um, yeah, it's a people are not full-time employed for a lot of different reasons, and mine is, like, very much by choice.
Yeah. Mine's like, I can't I did the office grind for, I don't know, 10 years or so.
Mhm.
And I just can't, I don't like, people barking orders at me. I don't like sitting in a cubicle all day. I don't like
Mhm.
having to absolutely be there at a certain time. But then, I
Mhm.
realized I not only do I make more money than I ever made in a cubicle, um,
Mhm.
this works like every day is an adventure. It's fun. And I'm not talking
Mhm.
about like, I mean, this I technically counts, even though I make peanuts off YouTube, like, my doing DoorDash, Instacart, and other jobs
Mhm.
like that is my bread and butter.
Mhm. Mhm.
I should ask you this at the beginning of the show. I guess we'll wrap
Mm.
on this topic. Can you talk about the National Association or North American Guild Beer Writers?
Yeah.
Did you found that organization or were you brought into it? And
No, no. This was founded many years, a decade before I became director. There's also a British Guild of Beer Writers that I believe the North American Guild of Beer Writers was modeled after.
Mhm.
Um, so it's existed and gone through many forms over its years of existence. Um, Prior to me, Brian Roth was the director and did an excellent job for a number of years. And then it was just, he was ready to step back. And I essentially ran unopposed for director.
Mhm.
And I've been very lucky, very privileged to lead that group for a couple of years. But yeah, I mean, it's a very dynamic group because media is changing all the time, right? Like
Right.
the name Guild of Beer Writers is now sort of all encompassing of all different kinds of media. But at the time it was founded, it was like, yes, beer writers work for newspapers or magazines, like, or they write books. That's what beer writing is. Now, obviously, there's so many more forms of beer coverage, and probably a lot of people watch your show or listen to podcasts and don't consume any print beer media.
Mhm.
So we welcome them all.
Yeah, it kind of the only my only not complaint, but I don't know, something I just don't like is that it has the word guild in the name, and usually guild
Mm,
implies like a union, like the Screen Actors Guild,
mm,
and it's like, but it's also the acronym is NAGBOA or NAGBO
hmm
or whatever.
hmm
Has the word nag in it, which isn't really, appealing. We
Yeah.
gotta change
Well,
that name, or because like, is it actually a guild? Like, I'm not like in a union. I gotta pay union dues,
no, it's
and
a professional membership it's a professional development organization. So people
yeah.
do pay yearly dues, but that goes to just like, support the professional development that we provide. I mean, myself, I'm a volunteer. I make literally no money from administrating the guild,
Yeah.
despite the fact that it takes a ton of work.
It's just something you
And
really believe in.
yeah, it was really important to me as a young writer, and continues that professional connection, especially as a freelancer. Like I don't have quote unquote coworkers, and so I rely on this group to connect me to my peers and like help me learn. The guild does like we provide financial grants, like the diversity and beer writing grant, where we pay usually newer, younger writers to cover topics related to any form of diversity within beer. So we pay them like a financial stipend to help support their reporting. We administer the annual beer writing awards every year, where we give out um, awards in various categories, including podcasting.
Mhm.
And yeah, we have other, we do like virtual happy hours and different kinds of educational programming. We have a meetup at Craft Brewers Conference every year. So that's what the membership helps pay for, is those kinds of like
Yeah.
outputs. But it is not like we don't have any kind of yeah, we're not like a bargaining unit. Um, because
Mhm.
we also recognize some of our members are full-time employed by their publication, right? And write
Right.
exclusively about beer. Most of us are freelancers. Some of us do this like completely as a hobby. So really like there wouldn't be any basis as the guild is currently formed for any kind of like labor organizing, nor is that really like what the guild is for.
Yeah. Is it
Yeah.
like a
I think
501(c)(4) or whatever it is? Like
yeah, we're
a
incorporated as like a professional
Yeah,
development
it's
organization,
not a
nonprofit.
it's not a charity and it's not a
Right.
lobby.
Right.
Yeah, 'cause
Yep.
my
It's
my homebrew club back in Albany was like that. Like, "We're not a
there you
charity, we're
go.
not a lobby. or
Yeah,
just
exactly.
nonprofit.
Um, exactly. And oh shoot, there was one other point I wanted to make about the guild.
Well, I
Oh well.
remember there used to be the
Yeah.
Beer Bloggers Conference, and I went to the
Mhm.
one in 2013 in Boston and 2016 in Tampa, and I don't think they do it anymore, but, like, that was, like, the closest thing, and
Mhm.
actually, I remember, wow, way back in the '90s when I was on AOL dial-up, I was living at my parents' house, and I was a journalist by day. At night, I was a film critic, and
Hmm.
I used to have a actual movie pass that, like, the theaters sent me, and I could just go to any
Hmm.
movie, and I think they charged, like, a
Oh, that's
buck or
awesome.
something like that,
Yeah.
and there was a society that I was a member of, and I don't know if it's still around. It was called the Online Film Critics Society. Maybe we could
Ah,
change the name of the like Online Beer Writers Society or just Beer
there we
Writers
go.
Society or
Yeah,
Beer Journalist Society. I don't know.
I think, it's just really hard to find that word that encompasses everything we do because I think some of our members would be like many of us do identify as like journalists or reporters, but I think some people would say like, "Oh, I'm not really like ethically bound to like the rules of journalism. I cover this as
Critic,
like a
yeah,
hobby and it's like I just
blogger,
kind of do
yeah,
beer review." Yeah, so I think it has been challenging to kind of find the word. And again, I think if we were founding this in the year 2024, it would perhaps have a slightly different title. But I think maybe they chose guild because brewers guilds use that, and
mhm,
that was something of an inspiration whenever the guild was founded 15 or 20 years ago.
yeah,
But I think it helps me if I think about guild in like the medieval sense of like
yeah,
a
yeah.
blacksmith's guild where it's just like, oh, all the blacksmiths get together and talk about blacksmithing.
Mm.
Um, I think that's more what we do.
Um, alright, so I guess it'll be last question or topic. So if somebody wanted to get a job like yours, like
Mm.
what steps or actions would you recommend they take?
Ooh. Oh my gosh. First, I would ask myself long and hard about it and say, "Are you sure you don't wanna make more money in
Mhm.
life?" No. But I think there is, this kind of ties back to really where our conversation started, which is like there is no substitute for just good journalism training. Like, I'm
Mm,
not saying you have to go to school for it necessarily, but working at a newspaper, working at a reputable publication with editors that are really going to like show you the ropes and really hold your feet to the fire. Um, Learning to write on deadline, learning to write accurately, and learning how to make ethical decisions. Again, like we don't cover like I don't cover politics or
mhm.
abortion or something like so fraught, but sometimes I have to make decisions about like ethically what is right here, and um really having that firm background and knowing what journalistic standards apply, like I would not trade that for the world. So if you can't, even if it doesn't involve beer, like get that kind of writing training under that journalism training under your belt. It'll serve you well. um and then be be relentlessly curious and ask the hard questions. It's literally your job. It's really awkward sometimes. I mean, as a young reporter, I remember just hating to be in any way confrontational. I was so worried, oh, this person isn't going to like me or whatever. Like, you get over that fast. And not
Yeah,
that I set out to be antagonistic, but like, it is truly your job. A lot of, you're going to talk to people in powerful positions. Like, maybe that's not saying the brewer at your local brewery is some like great person of power, but like you might be interviewing CEOs of companies and whatever. And like they deserve to be asked honest questions and to be held
yeah.
to account for their
I know.
answers. So
The worst they can
yeah,
do is just say no comment or get
totally.
out of
No,
here.
and you are safe in this and secure in the knowledge that like that is what you are there to do. That is the purpose of your
Yeah,
job. Yeah, no one ever has to talk to the media. This is one of the craziest, most amazing parts about being a reporter is that I get to just call people of all different types all over the world and ask them questions and they answer them. Like that is the best job you can have if you are a nosy, curious person like I am.
Speaking of calling, like, how does that work, like, in modern times? Because hardly anybody answers the phone anymore. Although I guess if you're just calling, like, a brewery headquarters or main number, at least, like, you might get through to somebody, but are you reaching out to people, like, on Twitter, on Instagram, or just emailing them? And, like, you're like, people ever, like, ignore you because they think, like, you're a heckler or, like, a troll or something? Or they just, like, they just can't verify you? Like, if somebody like, if
Yeah.
you try to say, like, "I'm Kate Bernot, and, like, here's my resume," like, where would you point them? Like, LinkedIn or
Yeah, LinkedIn or like, I mean, I have a website that's 𝑘𝒂𝒏𝒂𝒂𝒏.com that I haven't updated in nearly long enough. But I mean, ideally, like again, it completely depends who I'm trying to talk to. But like if I'm talking to Heineken USA, like I have a press contact, they know me, like they know what I do. Cool. Hi, here's who I want to talk to. Can we get in touch? Let's set up a phone call, blah, blah. You know, sometimes when news is fast breaking and fast moving and I am just cold calling, like, yeah, it's calling a brewery, explaining what I do. You know, I don't think many people like pretend to be journalists. So like generally they point me to the right, you know, communications person and I kind of get to where I'm going. I love the phone. Like I know that I'm in the minority, but like I make phone calls all day, every day. I love talking to people. And I think it's the best kind of conversation you can have because email, it's hard to have the nuance. It's hard to have the back and forth. It's hard to follow up and say, wait, what do you mean? What do you exactly mean by that? So I'll take phone calls all day, any day. But these days I am using Instagram a lot more to reach people.
You're thinking about starting your own podcast like this?
I do. No, I would not be as like good at the actual like engineering and publication of it as podcasters like yourself are. I do host a regular podcast, co-host with my colleague Beth Demon at Good Beer Hunting called The Gist, where we cover beer industry, the biggest like beverage alcohol industry news in 25 minutes or less, twice a month. And that's about the most I can handle is co-hosting that. So
that's funny. I wanted to start a show within the show where I basically cover the beer. Like I'd probably start out as bi-weekly or every other week, like covering the beer news.
Yeah.
And then if there is, because there's not always enough. There's not always enough to talk about for an entire week. Is this your? I think I found your podcast. Is this it? The Gist?
Nope. I will. Oh, I'm sad that someone else has a podcast. If you just search the Good Beer Hunting podcast, it's like nested within that.
Wow, there's a lot.
Yeah. Well, I don't host all the Good Beer Hunting podcasts, but if you search Good Beer Hunting, we actually published a new episode today.
It's like a sub thing.
Exactly.
Within Good Beer. Okay.
Yeah, so you'll see that we published an episode of The Gist today. It's our 10th episode. We just started this a few months ago. So, yeah.
The one with the fighting spirit?
Yeah, we're talking about Modelo Especial being the best-selling beer in America.
Okay. Oh, you know, I already subscribed to GBH.
There you go.
All right.
Nice.
All right. Well, I guess that's a good place to wrap. So let people know where they can find you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me, by the way. This was like a real pleasure. People can follow me on X if anyone is still there. I'm at 𝑘𝒂𝒅'𝒛. I'm on Instagram at the same handle, although I very rarely post about beer on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn.
And that's all you hiking.
Yeah, it's just me hiking and pictures of my dog. So if that's what you're there for, find me on Instagram. But really, you can follow my industry-facing news at sightlines.news, and then you can read my work in craft beer and brewing.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for doing the show, and maybe I'll be on your show someday.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this conversation.
Yep. Don't hang up. I'll be right back. All right. Thanks for watching. Bye.